Hello everyone. First of all, let me start by thanking Dr. for inviting me to this forum, and thank you, Radhika and Baba, for arranging everything. I'm joining now from Assam, and just wanted to start by stating, which was already stated in my introduction, that my research aims to understand human-animal relations with special reference to India's wildlife conservation. And I'm more interested on the impacts that conservation has on marginalized groups. And for quite some time, I have been exploring this topic. Now, as a social science person, but earlier as a wildlife biologist. And I have few slides, and I have a lecture. I have my notes, which I'll be reading from. The picture that you see on the screen is by Hashika Bora. This was produced here. Earlier, it was published in current conservation. So thanks, Shika, for this wonderful sketch, which reflects uh, what I'll be talking about in this talk on the relations between humans, animals, nature, and uh, and and its challenges in wildlife conservation in India. Wildlife conservation is mission oriented. It aims to protect species and preserve landscape with the aim to prevent extinction. There are many actors in conservation claiming to care for wildlife. In this talk, I aim to examine different kinds of care towards non-humans in India's wildlife conservation. Primarily, I focus on the indigenous communities' relations with non-human animals. I ask how and in what ways caring for humans and non-humans among different groups of people vary, overlap, and sometimes compete against each other. This question becomes very important as the current environmental crisis has pushed us to reconsider our relationship with nature more seriously. It's not very difficult to see what is happening around the world, how grave the conditions of humans and non-human species are as our planet continues to face unprecedented environmental damage. There's a great deal of research on scientific explanation seeking technical solutions to address this issue, but we also need a wider, deeper understanding of human nature relations that prevent the dominance of human-centric ideas. Focusing on wildlife conservation in India, I'm interested in stories that that take us beyond this simplistic dichotomy of humans and non-humans. I agree that the framework has been outdated, and I think we should start discarding the very rigid dichotomy between humans and non-humans. This talk is divided into three sections. First, I will discuss the practices of caring for and conserving wildlife and other life forms, including humans, among the indigenous philosophies from the Eastern Himalayas. Second, I will discuss how stories of caring for animals by certain communities do not find space in dominant narratives of conservation, especially of Dalits and tribals. And I also will touch upon the reasons why they are excluded. In the last section, I will discuss why India's modern conservation does not sit well with with indigenous notions of conservation. So I'm going to begin with a story from Arunachal Pradesh. Um, so this is the map of India. Most of my work uh, was here. I did a PhD here, and but I continue to visit this place to see what's happening in conservation and development. So this the state is Arunachal Pradesh, bordering China, and I'm talking about this region. In December 2012, Angrim Valley, one of the last villages close to Sino-India border, witnessed an important rescue mission carried out by India's well-known Delhi-based NGO, Wildlife Trust of India, in collaboration with the Forest Department. The mission was to rescue cubs that into a tank. After rescuing the tiger, the Forest Department and the NGOs planned to take them to a zoo, and this plan was challenged by the indigenous residents, the fishermen. They were very curious about why these cubs are being taken away. They claimed they had a kinship relation with tigers and the cubs should not be harmed. Inumishi suggested that they should be released back into the forest of the Long Valley where they belong. But if the cubs were released in the forest, it would turn fatal for the cubs in this very bitter cold weather. After a bit of a negotiation, it was decided that the cubs be taken to a zoo for treatment. Before shifting the cubs to the zoo, an Inumishi shaman, healer, village priest, was invited to perform rituals for the safety and good health of the cubs. So imagine the scene, researchers and veterinary doctors struggling to rescue the tiger cubs. They frantically measured and weighed these animals, collected samples of blood and scans for analysis. The researchers were very anxious to know if the cubs belonged to the Chinese subspecies of tiger, as the location was very close to China. What unfolded in this rescue mission was the different kinds of attention and care given to these animals by indigenous people, wildlife NGOs, and the forest department. Both groups care for the tigers, but their approaches differed. This is what I'll be exploring in this section. Caring for non-humans from an indigenous perspective, meanings of and attitudes to nature and their care vary across communities and cultures. They also generate different ideas and feelings depending on the conditions of humans who relate to them. Human relations with animals have always been multifaceted. Animals are worshipped, considered as a kin, and also slaughtered for spiritual offerings. Some cultures depict human related to nature, and specifically non-human animals, as a type of kinship. For example, as a parent-child relations, procreation, or simply just namesake relatedness. Many scholars listed here show that I'd like to specifically talk about Brian Morris, a very old study. So Morris shows that among the Malay Pandavas in South India, forests are an abode of in ancestral spirits and forest deities, which can be called a form of protection. People in Bangladesh and Nepal have similar kinship ties with tigers. Nepal, tigers, humans, and bamboo are seen as brothers. The forest dwellers of Sundarban see themselves as tied in a web of relatedness with tigers as traditions. These communities, broadly called as the non-Western societies, consider themselves part of an extended ecological family, fostering kin relations and assigning personhood status to non-human beings. Therefore, relationality with non-humans is a process of becoming with others who share the planet as species. Sabyasachi shows that both humans and non-humans in the forest are animated by jiva, the life force generated by nature. For Koitar people of Odisha, forests are both living spaces, shared spaces for humans and non-humans. Going back to the tiger cub story, the major concern for the Hindu group is that any harm to the tigers can cause severe repercussions because they say tigers are our brothers. Tigers are our kin. During my PhD fieldwork, this phrase was often used. In Hindi, they would say, "Hum tiger hamara bhai hai," and they would continue, "We do not harm them and we do not kill them." The care and concern emerge through the use of kinship relations with nature. Many communities show their belongings and genealogical ties with nature. Many communities also, I'm repeating the sentence, many communities show their belongings and genealogical ties with nature, specifically with animals, as a sense of identity. Along the same lines, Anna Singh argues for a more than human sociality, through which she urges scholars to explore multi-species landscapes and examine the dynamic relations between different species, their webs of relations that extend beyond humans. Missionary, similar to many other indigenous people, express their stewardship of the tigers. They say killing or harming is equivalent to homicide, and they project themselves as the guardians of all the wildlife, intricate social taboos. They say they are mindful that any form of harm to tigers will attract the anger of the forest spirits. Many examples of unfortunate incidents of fatal injury, accidents, and unnatural deaths are attributed to the violation of taboos and not engaging them and not engaging in proper behavior towards animals can cause severe uh, repercussions. So people fear the spirits that care for the animals, or they even say sighting of tigers are avoided while they are in the forest. In this case, care manifests itself through a series of intricate network of social taboos. This does not mean that they don't hunt other animals. Some animals are protected and some are hunted. If there is a definitive mission approach to care and conservation, I believe it tends to be pragmatism. Therefore, hunting is carried out, but with lots of restrictions. Nijaman and Mihu in their paper, Relations of Blood, show how restricting hunting and forest use is practiced through what they call informal culture-based approach. This practice has contributed to biodiversity protection, including the conservation of tigers. They argue that these restrictions are ancestrally mandated. They say morally correct behavior and taboos ensure people's well-being. Such regulatory system can work only if everyone observes the taboos, because violating taboos does not just bring misfortune to one person, just to the violator, but it can harm all kin members. Therefore, it shows forging of interdependence and cohesion in the society. Here one can see the notion of caring is based on moral and practical basis of our interaction between and among humans, spirits, and animals. So in their paper, they also talk about different kinds of restrictions. Some restrictions are related to food, some restrictions are related to space, some about gender relations, some about livelihood activities such as weaving, some even preparing food while menstruating women, and also washing clothes for like 10 year. So these are activities that are restricted by those who hunt or consume meat of large animals. Not just wild animals, even domestic animals occupy a significant position in their social and spiritual cosmology. They are not just a source of protein, but are also economically and socially valued proteins. Animals, both alive and dead, play an important role. For example, wild animals hunted in the forest or on farms become part of the social network as meat of the animal is distributed to the gang members. There's a sense of responsibility attached to animals, and the taboos observed during hunting and trapping, and this makes serious activity. Care here is practiced through, I repeat, a moral code observed by hunters during these trips, such as there's a list of taboos that you can see on the screen, which the hunters observe during the hunting, when they are in the hunting zone. Some of them are like no joking, abuse, not getting angry, should not curse somebody, should not crack jokes, etc. So these are the list of hunting taboos observed. And of course, there are forbidden words. For example, there are some words which they're not supposed to say while in the forest. I also documented a list of code words for animals, and instead of saying the real name, they would actually have substitute words. So that is an interesting aspect to keep in mind. So all this will actually are followed when the hunters are hunting, and the care is taken not to disturb the forest spirits. And of course, when they're going into the forest, they're asking permission before going into the hunting zone. So what you're seeing on the screen is a pictorial rendition of hunting landscape in the visual view. And the words that you see, the vernacular words that you see are intuition. They are neighboring district of Human Valley. So there are different zones in this picture. Here what you see is carrot is shown in the form of several restrictions. One particular restriction which I mentioned in this slide is of this language. They use hunters' speech registers with special vocabulary for animals, especially large animals. One such rule is to use a unique code word for animals during hunting. For example, musk deer. The English meaning of that is ALA, but when people at the forest looking for them, they refer this animal as Tambe Aruchi, which means meat of the high mountains. These code names for animals also reflect the hunter's rich knowledge of their habitat and the types of forest in which animals are found. Uttering the incorrect names is believed to have negative effect on hunters, which could manifest in the form of sudden illness, accident, or even losing their way back home from the forest. So this is just to show that there are forest spirits which takes care of these animals. And among the indigenous, the mountain spirits called Shukro, and an invader who say or say that Shukro is among the issues as wild animals. Saying that they are not going after the animals, but when they find the animals, these are being offered to people by mountain spirit Shukro. So, in all the above examples of proper behavior, what it shows is that among the indigenous philosophies, the lives of humans are entangled with fauna and flora, with whom they share their lives and even their afterlives. The eco-spiritual animistic world has social network beyond the human world to encompass non-human species. The forested landscape, for example, is not just natural but also cultural. River spirits, mountain spirits, farm spirits, even granaries have spirits safeguarding the grains and other farm produce. Such an integrated world of people, animals, spirits, and at the center is the village priest, Igu. Such an integrated worldview is largely absent in the Western industrialized world, where nature is seen just as a resource to be exploited for human utility. This differs from the state-led or science-based conservation. The basic difference is that among the, so let me go back to the screen, what you see on the screen in the village priest. This is Nava Siva from the government. And this would actually depict how missionary world or worlds are, especially in the social world, which goes beyond the notion of human or social. It also encompasses non-humans. So the basic difference between the indigenous philosophy and the science-based or state-led conservation ideology philosophy is that they consider humans and nature as separate. While the indigenous people such as the Mishmi do not see them as separate, but as holistic, overlapping with each other. So going back to my field and talking about wildlife conservation projects, in India, wildlife conservation projects are largely shaped by scientific knowledge with little or no insights from social history of the landscape. Sabrawal and Kodari show that social sciences and humanities are absent from most conservation biology or wildlife management courses in the developing world. Therefore, when scientists design projects, not adequate attention or priority is given to perspectives and needs of the local people. Focus only on the tigers, they rarely consider issues outside the purview of the wildlife research, particularly when they are fixated with one particular species. That is, according to Page West, a kind of eco-fetishism. Take, for example, these photos which I took in 2014. These are researchers looking for tigers from Wildlife Institute of India, and I accompanied them to see the kind of research they're doing. And I could see that, I could see that the search image was only focused on tiger science and tiger data. So I actually call them tiger scientists because they are researching, but they're focused only and fixated only on one particular species. And there's nothing, it's not their fault because it's the kind of training that is given to us and the researchers. So for science, understanding the natural world is through observing, measuring, and examining, like study objects. So these are camera tracked images from the Valley by researchers, collected by researchers. The use of technology in generating new knowledge about nature is on the rise. GIS, remote sensing technologies, and camera trap technology are being used by scientific experts and state planners to showcase the rich biodiversity, which often excludes people. According to a recent study, camera and drones planted. So these are some more images from Maldives Valley. So this is talking the golden cat, flower leopard, and going back to the point about doing research to advanced technology. Uh, Technologies like these are used by scientific experts and state planners to showcase the rich biodiversity, but it often excludes people. Sometimes the same technology, I don't have that image. Sometimes the same technology is also deliberately misused by local government for surveillance of human without consent. So I'm actually giving an example from Corbett National Park, where cameras and drones were planted in Corbett National Parks, and they were used, and images were used for surveillance of human without consent. So modern conservation, I argue, is a form of care which is heavily invested on the rarity of the species, which provides hierarchical care based on the species conservation status. According to Jamison, there's something about the rarity of an endangered species that heightens the element of respect for it. So I'm actually giving you the picture of IUCN Red List here. So IUCN is the International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources, is the world's oldest and largest global environmental organization, which almost has 1,300 government and non-governmental members in more than 150 countries. It is the global authority on the status of natural world and measures, and it actually brings on measures that needed to safeguard animals. Using field and research data, they're also involved in advocacy and education. IUCN's mission is to conserve nature to ensure equitable, sustainable use of natural resources. But in this, related to this talk, what is important is for us to see the role of the red data book. Earlier it was called red data book, now it's called the IUCN red list. It provides conservation status for each species after rigorous assessment of the population worldwide. It's an inventory of global conservation status and extinction risk of species. So what I'm trying to say is the modern conservation can assign certain status to the different kind of species. Some are critically endangered, some are conservation dependent, but there are also animals which falls under data deficient, or many of them are also not evaluated. So they are listed in a hierarchy of the index used of rarity. So I would like to focus on the idea of rarity here. And I repeat, according to Jamison, there is something about rarity of an endangered species that heightens the element of respect for it. These species are believed to carry an important value, like almost like a religious value pieces. The philosophy of nature conservation movements and wildlife campaigns highlight the notion of rarity and respecting rare life. So I think this is very interesting to see how care is also given according to the hierarchy of the species. Similarly, in India, we have in India we have these wildlife species listed according to different schedules from Schedule 1, Schedule 7, Schedule 5. According to India's Wildlife Protection Act, species are listed according to the severity of their endangerment. And according to the severity of their endangerment, the care and the attention is also given. It has a list of schedules of protected plants and animal species. Species under Schedule 1 and 2 have absolute protection, and severe penalties are imposed on those who have them if convicted. Schedule 3 and 4 are also protected species, but the penalties are much lower. Cat is biased towards large vertebrates and charismatic animals, and small animals, unglamorous ones, are considered as plebeian species by wildlife biologists, and they're not considered and are not considered worthy of attention according to us. Both IUCN and WPA, both IUCN and Wildlife Protection Act of India help design how caring the species, what kind of care does the species deserve depends on the status of the species. Therefore, duties towards wild and endangered species, Jamison says, it provides a new way of thinking about life itself, the rare life and the common life. Therefore, nature as dying and nature as endangered it's an interesting way that we can form a popular narrative in science and policy making. So this is a quote by Satyanarayana. So one of the important policies of conservation is setting up protected areas, which is a good example to show how caring for one species has the potential to create harm to others. In this case, setting up of protected areas for non-human animals has caused harm to human residents, especially poor tribals and Adivasis, vulnerable human groups who live around protected area. Here are some data of protected areas in India, more than 1,000. And of course, this is the breakup of national parks and wildlife sanctuaries. Since the implementation of Wildlife Protection Act, number of PAs has increased from 5, and the current number stands at 101, and it covers roughly 5% of India's total population. In addition, other areas are also designated for conservation, for example, tiger reserves and elephant reserves. There are 55 tiger reserves in India and 33 elephant reserves. They also have higher protection. So here it's not just animals, but also land area has also higher protection, which means human residents inside these parks are likely to get evicted. Making space for wildlife by removing human residents from the landscape is often justified because people under subsistence activities are seen with strong nature, and local communities are seen as the illegal occupants, sometimes labeled as poachers and sometimes labeled as habitat disturbers. So this is a map of protected area, and I'm just going to list down a list of so the way I'm connecting this to care is that we tend to care for endangered species, but there are human casualties while we show attention and conservation towards wild animals. And the numbers in the bracket will number of people evicted, displaced from tiger reserves in India. Caring for one set of species can be violent to others. Usually conceived of as benevolent, sometimes care may also become coercive. Certain forms of care could produce undesired and uncomfortable results, leading to what Van calls violent care of conservation or coercive conservation, as termed by Nancy Russo. So conservation policies aimed at endangered species and threatened ecosystem often marginalize the voices of Adivasis and Dalits, subjecting them to displacement from protected areas. Michael Lewis has argued that wildlife conservation in the form of protected areas is a US export, which was replicated in India's ecosystems. The national park model was replicated in various habitats and ecosystems nationwide. The ecological rationale behind this was that saving wildlife, especially tigers, would maintain the ecological balance. When the top predator is concerned, the argument went, the resources within the entire ecosystem will be secure. But this has created very difficult lives for forest dwellers. They were forced to make way for certain charismatic mammals such as tigers, rhinos, and creating a subaltern population in India's post-colonial. Conservation, I argue, is a discrete form of disposition that enhances the precarity of these vulnerable groups, and this is done in the name of conservation as a way of caring for non-human species. So therefore, the displacement of forest dwellers is, I believe, is a dark history in India's conservation and is yet to be thoroughly examined in India. Wildlife conservation has made the lives of Dalits and Adivasis, especially women, more precarious. So caring for animals is good, but in the name of caring for animals, there has been violence against very poor, vulnerable communities. So one needs to be alert that behind creation of green, undisturbed spaces or caring for wildlife lie the stories of dispossessed Adivasis, Dalits, other supported groups. So in the following section, I would like to shift a little focus. I would like to focus a little on Dalits and their relationship with non-human animals. So this is a quote from Daya Pawar. Daya Pawar is one of the first Dalit autobiographies, and this is the name of the book, Bandhuta. This is a book in Marathi, translated to English by J. Pinto. And he says, it is true that I have never felt any deep appreciation of nature. Nature seemed to be like a rich man with much property. I could only look down on the rich. The issues I had to confront left me with no space or time to stand and stare. Nature worship was for those whose stomachs are comfortably filled. The above quote is from Babita. This is not directly related to wildlife conservation, but the quote says something about Dalit's relations with nature. Pawar recalls his childhood memories, remembering his mother foraging in the jungle for food, often at the paying of the forest guards, and how people from his community were often forced to survive on whatever they would find in the forest, or even collect the grains left behind in the fields after harvest. Pawar's powerful narrative is a testament of Dalit lives and how they relate to nature. We cannot talk about animals. Same thing applies to when we talk about animals in Indian context. Without acknowledging its complexity, and sometimes it can be very disturbing and controversial. Dalit communities' lives are also entangled with lives of humans. They rear animals, they graze them, take care of them. Animals also become essential food sources and are also slaughtered when required. Caste hierarchies in India have also ordered animals in certain hierarchies. While some animals are positioned as superior by the dominant social order of caste in society, others seem to occupy a subordinate status as they are associated with certain inferior caste groups. For example, cows and buffaloes are both important part of the economy. However, the former is considered pure and later impure. Through the lens of caste, one can understand better how people's relations with animals, birds, and nature in general are socially constructed in India. In Dalit titles, for instance, nature is almost never revered as it is done and romanticized in the mainstream Indian literature. In testimonies of Dalits, they are compared to animals by dominant groups, both at the abstract level where India refers subhuman, but also referring to particular animals that are associated with their caste occupation. For example, the importance attached to cows as pure and spiritual beings by upper caste Hindus. They cannot be overemphasized. The notion of animals, some being sacred and others being polluting, creates deep divisions and friction between communities. The sacredness attached to cows has been increasingly used to incite violence against those who are outside the dominant caste, class, and religious groups. Most of the victims in these rising incidents of violence in the name of cow protection have been minorities, poor, landlords, Dalits, and Adivasis. Kancha Inaya asks, is cow's life worthier than those of Dalits? Asked Kancha Inaya asks. In his book, Why I'm Not a Hindu, Ilaya writes about his childhood as a shepherd boy. Each of the boys of his community would learn a specific language of the sheep, master sheep rearing, master, uh, uh, each boy of his community would learn the language of the sheep rearing tasks, including how to cure disease among the sheep and how to shear wool. Many communities labeled as marginalized and stigmatized are in fact highly productive social groups, argues Chile. He says they are agriculturists, hunters, pastoralists, butchers, hunters, and fishers. The Tory tappers know their trees by name, as the shepherds know their sheep or goats by name, and the peasants their cows. The Adivasis and Dalits' deep knowledge of the land, animals, and trees demand that their intimate relations with animals and other beings need to be acknowledged as what he says epistemologically important. And this perspective is very often absent in academia. For instance, in his path-breaking book, Dalit Ecologies and Caste and Environmental Justice, Mukul Sharma describes how animals become markers of social relations, power formations, and differences. Similarly, tribal ecology, as proposed by Christopher et al., appeals to make space for a closer study of how nature remains one of the primary means by which tribal identities are negotiated in contemporary India. Another powerful example comes from hill Karyas of Mayurbhanj, Odisha, where Sabitachi reveals that tiger is not seen as the effects of the forest ecosystem. According to Karyas, there is no king of the forest. The queen bee is at the apex of the forest ecosystem. The forest is a manifestation of feminine principle, and Mother Earth is the queen of the forest. Karyas, known for their honey collection, view that the forests are a delicate space for this activity. Both shifting cultivation and honey collection for the hill Karyas are deeply rooted in their ability to listen to and read the forest. Saraswati also emphasized the care-taking practices of the hill Karyas, noting that care is integral to the relationship between forest dwellers and the earth. Similarly, Manbhava in his new book, Plantation Worlds, dedicates a whole chapter to Adivasi's worldview of the forest. People believe in an animal guardian, Devta, or a spirit called Nagariya. He says they help the Adivasi live closely to elephants in a very disturbed environment of plantations. The views of indigenous of the ecosystem people, a term coined by Bhuvan Gadgil, decenters our understanding of nature deeply rooted in Western science-based knowledge that exclude indigenous knowledge system and their way of living. Moreover, the dominant discourses of ecological sciences disregard and dismiss the knowledge by the indigenous groups, which have been the template for India's wildlife conservation till recently. The views of Adivasis do not sit very well with the modern conservation approach of the state and NGOs, but this can open up opportunities for collaboration and shape conservation initiatives, keeping in mind Adivasis knowledge of animals and forests. So what you see on the screen is the new community conserved area by both lands of Vishnu in Upper Valley. The idea of conservation is changing, the conservation landscape is changing. So you can see a group of men standing proudly in front of the community conserved areas. They call it eco-cultural reserve. So the difference between water community-based conservation stands not very, as I've been arguing, it's not very comfortable with the modern conservation efforts, which is through legal regimes, science-based conservation, which do not acknowledges ways in which indigenous people see the world and care for the non-human world. And the world is populated with many such examples all over the world of how it has a very diverse understanding of humans and non-human relations. Yet these remain important blind spots in scientific conservation, says Sundar Sarabhai, especially silence about the role of affect and morality in scientific practice as well as scientific knowledge needs more discussion. The silence of not inability of the scientific practice to acknowledge people's knowledge is epistemological. The inability of scientists to factor in essential elements of social is something that's the reason is could be multiple. One of the reason is epistemological. Sundar Sarkar observes once you bring in the social, can it remain science? He asks. Typically, in any science, what gets removed from scientification of a discipline are the human, the social, the cultural aspects of practice and knowledge. And therefore, the idea of care and effect is very difficult in scientific endeavor and scientific practice and scientific knowledge. While I'm giving a lot of examples from indigenous knowledge, and I urge that there are lessons we can learn from indigenous people, I'm careful not to romanticize the indigenous knowledge. However, I want to stress about this example of community conserved areas, which is setting up of areas which is managed mainly by communities, is seen as a panacea for biodiversity conservation in the face of ecological crisis. Uh, so community-based conservation such as this aims to create more inclusivity and has been reaching out to the same communities whose knowledge were initially ignored. So the rise of CCAs or community conserved areas is one approach that is increasingly reshaping India's wildlife conservation, and it has also challenged the power structures of the state. So this is my last slide. So the point I want to make is the knowledge of tribals and Dalits. Once they share their knowledge about nature, the story of wildlife conservation in India will look different. We may start thinking about caring for animals and humans in a very different light. I will leave you with this quote, or this is a picture of it. I mean, it's this point. This is a book cover of my forthcoming book called The Beings on the Least Human Animal Relations of the Margins, where I'm talking about which Dalits and tribal groups, how they relate to animals, and the kind of caregiving practices of people across the country. So what I would like to leave you with is this quote by an Englishman from my interview with the PhD framework. And when I talk about conservation, this person replied, saying that we are also conservationists. I think we should give them the credit of conserving and also caring for species. And often they also say that the other quote they say is, like tigers, we are also endangered. And this statement is very powerful because they also talk comparing themselves to animals. The conditions of animals and humans are they are in need of care, especially those people who are very marginalized. So often they say, like tigers, we are also endangered, making the point that wildlife conservation also needs to care for humans along with caring for non-humans. Thank you, and I would like to have your comments and questions. Thank you so much,